Good morning and welcome back from your tea and your comfort break this morning. It's been quite an interesting morning listening to Desig and Jürgen and all of our experts on dams, siltation, and the number of solutions that we need to be looking at to reduce some of the issues that we are dealing with in terms of dam siltation and sedimentation. A very warm welcome to everyone. My name is Chantal Kotsia from the Water Research Commission, and I will be facilitating this plenary session and panel for you this morning. Joining me today is Professor Tali Palmer, Professor and Director of the Institute for Water Resources at Rhodes University, Mr. Stanley Chitwamu Lamoni from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, Ms. Nomvuza Mjadu, Department of Land Reform and Rural Development, and our partners, Development Bank of Southern Africa, represented by Ms. Libby Dreyer, and also joining us from the South African National Biodiversity Institute is Ms. Alex Marsh. So to introduce the session this morning, a lot of what you've already heard with regard to dam siltation being a major issue in South Africa, from the design of dams to the state of our supporting infrastructure and the role of various and multiple sectors with regard to the impact on our water sources and resources. So how do we develop and improve a holistic, systematic approach for sustainable dam design and management? We are going to be listening into a number of experts and representatives on the panel today. And to kick us off, we're going to start with Professor Tali Palmer. Tali, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. So nice to be with you all. Although we've all been on Zoom excessively for more than a year, it's still strange to me not to be actually connecting with people. But I did see many of the names of people I know well, so hello. I think this is a really important and timely session. And I would like to suggest some radical ways forward. So in the questions to guide us that we were sent, this idea of needing, I've got three main points to make. This point of needing a systematic approach. We do need a systematic approach. In a complex system where you have infrastructure interfacing between society in relation to a natural resource, you have a highly complex system and you need to understand how complex systems work. And so we need systemic approaches followed by and underpinned by systematic approaches. So systemic is where we pull things together, and systematic is where we organizedly address components to make sure that we are being efficient and focused. Now, you will have heard Benny Duval this morning. I think you heard him talking about probably the TITSA project and the kinds of approaches that have been put together to deal more holistically with siltation problems. And later in the conference, you're going to be hearing Derek Dutoy and Hugo Retief, who have also worked in this systemic way of dealing with complex problems. Now, I want to be really clear. We very badly need the most excellent input from all of the sectors and people affected by water resources. So we have to take account of the people who manage the resource, the people who experience problems with the resource, the people who fund and make input into it, and all of the governance and institutional arrangements that we need to make the system work. Several of the excellent policies that we have in place to manage water in South Africa, so our water policies, our strategic plans, the different pieces of legislation, all call us to participation, to equity, to sustainability, and to efficiencies. And we can all see multiple points of failure where we are disappointed in the hopes that we had for the policy and legislation that there are. It is far more difficult to address the real points of failure and to shift our thinking towards practical systemic approaches than it is to change those high-level policies and laws. We need to focus in on the difficult business of systemic practice. And it's difficult because it requires both compartmental excellence and a new set of skills in putting excellence together across sectors. It requires us to recognize that knowledge and excellence also reside in communities who know their local condition better than anyone else. And so we need deep social science and excellent social science to bring people in effectively. This is really difficult. In South Africa, the people I know who are doing it best are a ward, and you've got Derek and Hugo speaking. You've got Alex Marsh following me later on, and Sanbi is fully involved in the KwaZulu-Natal Mgeni work that is integrating, and you've got Nontutuzela Gola coming on later on. So you've got the makings of a radical change towards a commitment to being systemic. But in the same way that you would not expect a dam built to excellent standards not to cost anything, a radical change towards systemic approaches needs investment in terms of time and faith in the time it takes to make effective contacts. We want linear efficiencies in compartments, and we want the benefits of integration, and you cannot have both. You have to have, you cannot separate those. You have to invest in the time it takes to be excellent in the technical areas. And you now, if you want to solve or move towards shifting complex problems, you need to invest in the processes of integration. And just to punt some of the work that we're doing, we have developed something we call the adaptive systemic approach, which brings the theory that I've been calling on this morning into examples of practice and into a nicely combined systemic and systematic process that helps guide groups of people across different sectors and with different knowledges towards being able to start learning how to work in the systemic way. Chantal, thanks very much, and everybody else for listening.
Thank you, Tali. And I think you've made some very important points about the disconnects, about where these failures are, but also the multi and transdisciplinary aspects that are required for a systemic change. And I think both Shafiq and Lesego and their project teams are also working tirelessly to bring all of this to the project. Thank you very much. So just on that note, there will be questions coming through on the Q&A box. I will review these for you, but Tali, I think as you go through the Q&A, please go ahead and respond if you can. To the other speakers, I will bring up some of the questions if we have time later so that you can respond to them as well. I'd now like to go to Stanley. Stanley, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us a bit of diversity on this strong female panel this morning. You are most welcome, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Like what Talia said, I think the management of water resources that involve the building of the dams should be perceived in a holistic way. I would like to start by saying dam design should be the integral part of the ecosystem conservation and management. I'm saying this because the ecosystems that are around the dams, particularly those that are upstream, plays a crucial role in regulating the amount of silt and sedimentation into the dam. And therefore, conservation of those ecosystems becomes crucial. And in a situation where those ecosystems are already degraded, I think we need to invest in rehabilitation of them to make sure that they perform those critical ecosystem services that at the end of the day will enable us to have dams that carries more water than the sediments themselves. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that we need to invest in the conservation of the ecosystems that are around those dams. We need to invest in the management of those areas. We need to invest in the rehabilitation of the other ones that are already at a state of degradation. There is a saying which says the whole is bigger than the sum of its parts. I think we need to realize that in order for us to achieve this, it's not going to be one department show or one institution show, but it will need a coming together in as far as policies are concerned, in as far as programs are concerned. We have developed, or we are busy developing at the moment, 3 departments: agriculture, water and sanitation, and DFFE. We are developing the framework for wetlands management at now presently, because we have realized that wetlands are cross-cutting amongst those 3 departments, and it becomes necessary for us to come up with something that will link the 3 of us, so that when we apply what comes from that framework, we consider it as representative or responding to the legal provisions that we have in legislations that we either implement or administer in our departments. I would like to also say that dams should be managed as part of broader ecological infrastructure, where the availability of water as a resource, the quantity and the quality should also be considered, so that in the end we have the dams that produce what we intend to have as a country. In dams that are associated with wetlands, for example, we are aware that wetlands are important for flood attenuation, sediment trapping, and thereby preventing sedimentation and siltation in those dams. I would like to stress the point that in case we have got those wetlands, we need to invest in their conservation. In case those wetlands are destroyed, we need to invest in their rehabilitation. The department has got a program called Working for Wetlands program that is dedicated and funded to deal with the rehabilitation of wetlands, and the wetlands that are associated with dams, particularly in the upper stream of the dam. I think in strategic dams, this program should also be dedicated into those wetlands, so that at the end of the day, we don't have unnecessarily the deposition of sediments and siltation into the dams. I think as stakeholders involved in this, we need to put financial resources together, and if there are funded programs, we need to have those programs geared towards strategic resources that are linked to strategic dams. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stanley. And you've raised a number of very good points. I think across both you and Tali, you've spoken about the financial resources, as well as the investment made to make some of these radical changes and to shift policy and implementation. And I think for both Tali and Stanley, if you can think about, are we moving fast enough with some of these policy changes? And it will be good to hear from you after all the speakers have spoken on your thoughts around that. And it's wonderful to hear the integration and the collaboration between the various departments, Stanley. That's very positive. Thank you. So our next speaker this morning is Ms. Nomvuso Mjadu from the Department of Land Reform and Rural Development. Nomvuso, welcome.
Thanks, Chanda. Good day, colleagues. I'm Nomvuso Mjadu from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development under the Directorate of Water Use and Irrigation Development. My talk won't be too much differ from what Mr. Stanley has elaborated on, considering the fact that there's a complexity and the high cost associated with the process of desilting. I would like to follow the route, which is like prevention is better than cure, looking at the fact that it is too difficult to remove the silt once it has been deposited into the dams. I think it is very important for us to identify exactly the sources, as the studies have indicated that the main cause of dam siltation is soil erosion. I think we need to identify exactly those activities around within the catchment, especially the upper catchment, that are contributing to soil erosion. And when we are developing the strategies, we mustn't look only around the infrastructure. We must take into consideration those measures, the strategies which are like preventing or reducing the formation of sediments, and also slowing down, or maybe which can catch the sediments before they can be deposited into the dams. I think in that way we can have a long and sustainable way to manage the silt, since it is hampering most of the development that is planned. Also taking into consideration some of the options that are used to manage the dam siltation, they require some environmental authorization. You find that during the design stage of the dams, those measures were not put in place, the management plans were not there. So as time goes on, you find that now the dam is silted, there's a need maybe to raise the dam wall or to remove the silt. There's a lot of authorization that is required there, which can also time consuming and is very costly. If we can maybe look at it's not the dam siltation issue, but just an example of the cost that is associated with the raising of the dam wall, taking the project in the Glen William Dam, where we are trying to raise the dam wall. It is led by the water and sanitation. The environmental processes that are required, they are time consuming and they are costly. I think if maybe I just saw, because I'm not that much of an expert in silt, I was just doing a literature review because we're also having a problem for our small farm dams. If maybe the maintenance plans can be built when we are still doing the design of the dams, and also taking the amount of potential silt that can be accumulated by a dam during the planning, most of those challenges can be eliminated. And also in terms of budgets, because our department has been receiving a number of grant application for the desilting of small farm dams. And for us, it's like the process, the methodology is not a sustainable one, because each and every year there's a huge amount that is being requested by the provincial departments for desilting. And also in terms of legislation implications, I think we need to ensure the compliance to the Conservation of Agricultural Resources Act in collaboration with the NEMA and the National Water Act. I think those, especially looking at the removal and dumping of the silt, because as it is silt, I can say it won't be harmful to human or to the environment, but maybe if due to decomposition, infiltration and percolation, it can end up having some harm to the groundwater system. Yeah, I think we have to look at the holistic environment, the treatment of the catchment, upper catchment, all the strategies which reduce the incoming of the sediments into the dam. I think if we can do that, we can have over and above whatever other measures that are implemented, we can have a long-term solution which can be more sustainable and also affordable by all, including the small-scale farmers. I thank you.
Thank you, Nombuso. I think your point on the fact that we need to work better in the planning phases has really hit home. We're not just with a number of our panelists, but I do know that this is something that Shafiq and Lesego want to get right through this national siltation project. So thank you for raising that as well. And I want to leave you with a question, Nombuso. You know, you've spoken about that prevention is better than cure, that we have really fantastic strategies. And I think from a land reform and development point of view, rural development point of view, are these strategies being implemented well? And what are some of the things that we could be doing better in terms of the implementation of these strategies? So I'd like to leave that with you, and you can respond to it a bit later. And I also want to encourage, I know that Libby is going to go on now, but for Tally, Stanley, and Nombuso and Alex to please have a look at Bonani's question around cost-benefit analysis on the Q&A. It will be interesting to get your inputs on there. But I will raise it again towards the end of this panel. Libby Dreyer from the Development Bank of Southern Africa. Libby, welcome. And I believe that you have a presentation for us this morning. You are on mute, Libby.
Yes, yes. I'm hoping that you can see that.
We can hear you. Yes, it's coming through.
Good morning, everybody. My presentation this morning is going to address many of the similar themes that both Stanley and Nombuso addressed, but more from a financing perspective. So very briefly, I am speaking on in terms of the experiences that we in the DBSA have undergone over the last period. And what is the DBSA? So we are a development finance institution. Our sole shareholder in South Africa is the South African government. And our strategic mandate is very much driven by national, continental, and global development policy. And so, therefore, sustainable development, and in this case, sustainable infrastructure, is at the core of our business. In financing a sustainable infrastructure, we work both with public and private sector clients, with a strong emphasis on promoting responsible investment practices. And in this regard, we work across the infrastructure value chain. So right from the planning stage of infrastructure through to operations and maintenance. But then going on to the water challenge that we face in South Africa, I think we're all aware that South Africa is a water scarce country, that we have a real water deficit, and that it means that we have to act responsibly in terms of our water resources. These water resources are increasingly being constrained by climate change, which is having a further impact on that. And our access to water and sanitation, and the water services that dams provide, we recognize them as an essential good. Yet 30 years into our democracy, we understand that access to water for public health, social inclusion, economic growth, and job creation remains unequal. So how do we address this? Our current approach is very much focused on technical solutions driven by an engineering approach, which means that we focus on better planning, better financing, better development to maintain our water sector infrastructure. And as we build back better and ramp up our efforts to transition to a sustainable society in support of the Sustainable Development Goals, we having to recognize that placing all of our human and social resources on built infrastructure solutions may not be the optimal approach to achieving SDG 6, clean water and sanitation for all. If we accept that we need to find more inclusive and holistic solutions to addressing our water challenges, what options do we have? How do we build people-centered and nature-based solutions to address our access challenges? At DBSA, we've been partnering with the South African National Biodiversity Initiative to utilize funds from the Global Environment Facility to pilot an initiative that begins to optimize water security through better management of biodiversity. And this approach builds on an initiative on a global paradigm shift, which seeks to shift water resource, to seek changes in water resource management. In that regard, we increasingly recognizing that investment in water needs to, in ecological infrastructure needs to be recognized as a key component of better water resource management. And it's integral to our water solutioning. So this new focus emphasizes the value of ecological infrastructure in supporting built infrastructure to improve service delivery and strengthen water security. Here we're recognizing that investments in ecological infrastructure and the maintenance and restoration of healthy ecosystems can have multiple benefits. This includes mitigating the effects of floods and droughts, contributing to wastewater treatment, unlocking improved water services, protecting the value of built infrastructure, and saving money in the construction and maintenance of conventional infrastructure, and most importantly, creating jobs. However, unlocking these sustainable benefits through a renewed attention to ecological infrastructure requires massive collaboration between both the public and private sector. And in ensuring this collaboration, there are a whole lot of challenges that need to be addressed. I think today's platform is quite important because it begins to enable stakeholders to address these challenges and to look at what are the challenges that we need to address. Firstly, in terms of the public sector, there are 4 key issues. One is addressing the optimal public finance mechanisms through which resources can be mobilized to support catchment management. We know that our water sector legislation places this responsibility on the public sector and public sector entities for water resource management. But how do we begin to enhance that collaboration between entities to ensure that resources are optimized? And then secondly is to work with identified agencies to address collaboration within catchments and enhance a recognition of the importance of natural ecosystems in water services management. And then thirdly, it's addressing the role of the value of catchments on public entities' balance sheets through natural capital accounting by enabling the flow of funds to, for example, the National Infrastructure Fund, which has recently been established to support ecological infrastructure. So it's beginning to identify what is the financial value of ecological infrastructure and how do we tap into the funds that are available for public sector entities. And then lastly is to look at what are the appropriate catchment strategies that can provide visible links between built infrastructure, catchment ecosystems, and water security. So those are some of the challenges that the DBSA is trying to work with SANBI to address in terms of public sector financing. And then in terms of the private sector, there are also a number of issues that need to be addressed here. And importantly, these relate to the ability to invest in water catchments. And here the private sector's exposure to water insecurity is a key driver for looking at how the private sector can begin to invest more in catchment management. Here, the need for water, as the need for water security increases, the private sector will be encouraged to invest more in healthy catchments. Water pricing here will be key in addressing the scarcity and value of water and recognizing what is the value and benefits that investing in catchments can provide, including that of addressing dam siltation, which a number of my colleagues have addressed. But importantly, providing finance agencies as exploring the returns on investments in creating healthy catchments with opportunities for blended finance and water bonds as an add-on to conventional finance is an approach that we as DBSA are beginning to address. But not only is it about creating new financing instruments, whether they be blended finance, water bonds, it's also addressing and mainstreaming ecological infrastructure in existing loan financing. Increasingly, our environmental specialists within financing institutions are recognizing that if we don't prioritize ecological infrastructure within our existing approaches, we can actually lead to an undermining of both ecological infrastructure and traditional built infrastructure. So it's that acknowledgement of the linkage between the two is really important. And then finally, just to say that investing in water catchments provides a number of benefits to address South Africa's water shortages. In terms of building healthy ecosystems and catchments, building more sustainable localities, creating new value chains, supporting better collaboration between the private, public, and civil society, ensuring sustainable jobs, and enabling us to better achieve SDG 6, clean water and sanitation for all. And that ultimately is all of our responsibility in partnership. So thank you.
Thank you, Libby. And I'm very happy with your acknowledgement of the fact that our investment decisions do need a review in terms of how these decisions are made. And for example, the infrastructure fund, we're hoping that as part of this national siltation project and community, that we can engage with the DBSA to see how some of these decisions are influenced and how they can be improved. So thank you very much for your presentation. I'm now going to hand over to Alex for Alex to share a bit with us, and we'll then go into some of the Q&As. Alex, welcome to the panel.
Morning, thanks Chantal. Yeah, and very, very great to be with all of you today. And there's a remarkable amount of synergy across in thought across all of the panelists today. So without repeating any of the important points that have been raised already, maybe to start with, how the issues that we're talking about today may manifest in the water sector, but they're well beyond the ability of the water sector to solve. And they often arise in other spaces. So, just recognize the importance of land use decision making in how we approach this work is just so fundamental, because siltation arises in other spaces. And our work with the natural resource management sector is so important in having a holistic approach to catchment management, and there to start to think about who the stakeholders really are, both across sectors, but also across different tiers of government, and the people living in those landscapes. So for me, when we start to talk about developing improved holistic systems and approaches, it really is about trying to unlock the kinds of collaboration that create transformative change in landscapes. And also within that, to find ways to address the barriers to cooperation. It's breaking down the silos that we so often operate in. We talk about the need to do it a lot, but to do it in a functional way, in a systemic way, as Tali mentioned, is so challenging. And so what are the barriers we're creating that prevent us from really engaging in polycentric governance systems, both at a catchment level with all the partners across private and public and finance sectors, but also on a national level across all of the government sectors that have complementary outcomes that they want to achieve, but we don't necessarily see that so clearly. And one of the big areas that we have learned some incredible lessons over the years is just finding ways to develop a common language. We've been so struck in working increasingly with the water sector and doing the really exciting work we're doing with Libby in the finance sector, that so often we're just not speaking the same language. And how do we find a common language to be able to work towards common goals? And one of the aspects that we have experienced as quite powerful is in terms of having common science-based spatial tools that we use. If we're looking at the same maps and understanding that we're seeing the same things across these landscapes, it really helps to create the kinds of conversations that shift the way that we work together. And then the second point, and Libby has said so much that I wanted to underscore around finance flows. So I won't go into detail there, but just to say that, investing in the public good is so crucial at this moment in time. And the recognition that investing in the public good often represents a saving to the fiscus. That the saving in disaster risk reduction that can be achieved by some of these preventative measures are really large. And I think that we need to start telling that story better, so that as we look at building between this gray-green nexus, the built infrastructure and the ecological infrastructure, and how they need to be seen as a system that is both funded and managed in a more holistic way. How do we tell that story of how, in terms of ecosystem-based adaptation, it's often much cheaper to manage systems in a holistic way than it is to figure out how to do all the mechanistic operations that are needed reactively down the line. The third point that I wanted to make was around the critical role of ecological infrastructure, which Stanley has already spoken about. But just to underscore the role of provincial governments, local governments, various sectors, of how we work with agri and how we work with our full system into these issues, and what are the platforms and mechanisms for interaction that we build in order to do that effectively. And then maybe lastly, to talk about the importance of policy certainty. We have so many policies and regulations that are powerful and groundbreaking internationally. And how do we bring them to full effect, to be doing the things that they're designed to be doing? Because getting that right would be fundamentally powerful in our systems. And then in terms of the strategies that we have, such as the water pricing strategy, and even having the securing of 11 of our 22 strategic water source areas hardwired into the MTSF, which is such an amazing thing that is happening right now. And some of the science around selecting the 11 strategic water source areas has been very, very deep and well thought through. And now what are the policy recommendations about securing those important spaces for water security? So I think that in terms of our policy landscape, there's been a lot of hurry up and wait that across all sectors has been happening. And I think that if we could really drive policy certainty across our strategies, and then activate platforms where we all figure out not just how other departments relate to implementation, but how they're intrinsic to it. I think that could be a really amazing new phase in polycentric governance as we work towards water security. I think I'll stop there, Chantal.
Thank you, Alex. And again, carrying through that golden thread of collaboration and integration and working together. The one thing that I would like to leave with you, Alex, is to maybe consider, and I know that a lot of work has gone in around the social good and the public good around water, as well as the savings, etc. But I'd like to push you a little bit around what does this actually mean for growth and the economy? And just taking the words from our CEO, Mr. Desikan Naidu, where he spoke at length about how does this make us competitive? How does this put us on the map as South Africa, for whatever the case may be? And I'd like to leave that with you, because I think as a community, we are always afraid to go there. And I think we don't have a choice but to go there. And I think it's also very important for Libby to also come in on this conversation. So thank you very much for all of the inputs this morning. I want to quickly go to the questions that have been raised on the chat box. And the one question was around the cost analysis and being able to undertake a proper cost-benefit analysis and building business propositions around restoration. So I see that someone has responded to that. So thank you very much. And if anyone has any points to make on that, that would be great. Leonardo has also made a point with regard to Nombusa's comments and what she had to say around being able to work in an integrated way. How do we do this? Can we do this? So please do respond to that as well. And so I'm going to hand back now to the panel itself. And I'm going to ask you to maybe just respond to some of these questions, but also the questions that I've put forward to you. And I'm going to go with Tali first.
Thanks very much indeed. Chantal, I'm sorry, I didn't write down your question and I've been reading the Q&A. Could you just remind me of your question?
Sorry, Tali. So I had made a a few points around the multi and transdisciplinary and the radical changes that are required and the investment side of things. And yeah, I also wanted to know, so that's, and the disconnects. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, I got it. I've been reading the Q&A with real interest, and there are 2 points that I'd like to make. One is that one of the characteristics of complex systems is that it's very difficult to shift the system unless you intervene concurrently at critical points. So quite often we throw investment into solving a problem when there are critical connections that even if you throw a lot of money in there are other factors constraining that effort. So this systemic analysis of which critical intervention points are needed, which leverage points. There's some very interesting research on systemic analysis and leverage points. And then coordinating investments so that in a particular complex problem, we experiment with multiple concurrent interventions. One of the key factors in this systemic integrated approach is the critical role of co-learning, of investing in understanding across disciplinary and management silos, so that because we can't manage these problems with single interventions, those multiple interventions require feedback as to, we're trying this here, this is happening, maybe you've got to adjust this. Because the systems are dynamic and you have to work in time and collaboratively. Now, this isn't easy, and we've got to try in quite small places to see and learn these skills. But we learned how to build dams. We learned how to grow economies at the cost to the environment and to social. So inequity in environment and social is the consequence of externalized costs from economic growth. If we want to lead, if we want to do what Desigan has said, we have to be the country that says, actually, redressing social and economic imbalances is the pathway to a more sustainable future. It may mean different, and it may mean changing value systems and modest dreams. I'm going too far in warbling. I'll stop there. I get on a bit of a roll. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Oh, we love it, Tally. Thank you. Thank you. Now, Vusa, I want to go over to you now, just based on what you've heard and some of the questions raised.
Chantal, I have a problem accessing I don't see the Q&As, but
So I think Leonardo was speaking to exactly the question that I had asked you about the integration across the different government departments. And I think, and you had made a point around the fact that we have got fantastic strategies, we have strategies, and I think Alex has also made that point. But how are we doing in implementing those strategies? I mean, are we leaving that to somebody else? And how are they doing as our agents of change?
Oh, yeah, that's true. I think there is a gap regarding the implementation of strategies, not only the strategies, even also the research, because we've been undertaking a lot of research in collaboration with the Water Research Commission. But when it comes to implementation or the adoption of whatever knowledge that's been generated is still a problem. I think what is lacking from other maybe spheres, even the users, in our case, the farmers, is maybe we need to clearly highlight to them the benefits, maybe the incentives to the personally, not only to the environment, to ensure that whatever that has to be implemented, that they need to adopt, how are they going to benefit personally? Whether if it can be maybe at a monetary value or maybe some other savings that they can, maybe a tangible thing to show them that you can benefit 1, 2, 3. And also with regards to the implementation of the policies, I think as a national government, maybe when we start, we need to, I know it's happening already, but maybe not at the level where it can be adopted and implemented by the provincial spheres and the local offices. I think we need to get a buy-in, strengthen in the buy-in from the beginning, and also don't just come up with the policy and not the resources to implement. We need to put that in the planning, that there is this budget allocated for 1, 2, 3 for programs to run smoothly. And also we need to, in terms of the authorization that are needed, they are so lengthy. I know we've been trying to adjust like the WULA process to make it a little bit shorter, to maybe not to hamper the development, but still the budgets, those studies, they need a lot of budgets. There is a gap there in terms of what's supposed to be done and the required resources to make sure that it's really happening. So I think we still have some polish up to do as the government and the other spheres of government.
Fantastic. So planning for the resources that we actually need, and we underestimate this usually. Yeah. So I now want to ask Stanley and Libby, do you have anything to contribute in terms of the discussions this morning, and especially around where we should be investing? Stanley, I think Leonardo has also asked, can we meet? Can we look at some collaboration? How is this going to fit into the NatSort project?
Thank you so much. You gave me a specific question immediately I finished my presentation. And that question goes as follows. Are we moving fast enough with the policy change? Did I get it correctly?
That is correct. And the second question is from Leonardo.
Okay, let me deal with this one first. What we should be mindful of is that the speed at which we move should not be measured on how many policies have we amended and how many new ones have we developed. But we should look at whether the change is achieving an intended goal and whether the change is informed by science and current condition on the ground. And the last question we should ask ourselves is whether the change is solution orientated. Let me give you an example. There was a realization that Working for Wetlands program is a program geared towards providing solutions. However, it was subjected to two kinds of authorization, one under the WULA and one under the National Environmental Management Act. But just to speed up the program that is geared towards providing solutions, instead of going through the longer WULA process, it was subjected to general authorization. And under NEMA, instead of going the whole EIA process, it was classified under basic assessment. So what I'm trying to say is that when we look at these policy changes and policy amendments, let's look at whether the solution that we are giving, is it in achieving an intended goal, and is it solution oriented? Thank you for that one. What was the next one?
I think it was a request from Leonardo to collaborate more and integrate more. So I think you can just say yes on that one, Stanley.
Yes, and I would like to say the whole is bigger than the sum of its parts.
Yes, correct.
Cooperation is inherent, yes.
Thank you, Stanley. Libby, would you like to have a few words before we close out with a few points from Alex?
Yes, I think the real challenge for financiers is
Can you put your camera on, please, Libby?
Sorry. I think the real challenge for financiers and even institutions such as the DBSA, which ostensibly act as development institutions, is that debt financing and requires repayment. So how does investment in ecological infrastructure, how is it structured to ensure repayment. That, I think, is the biggest challenge. And so that's why I think this project that we're working with SANBI on is really important, because it begins to identify the levers around which one can begin to structure those solutions. And so when we talk about systemic interventions, and when we talk about the involvement of all role players, we need to be very clear that when the financing part of that puzzle comes to the table, we need to have the right tools in place to do that. Increasingly, I think bonds, and whether they be SDG bonds or social bonds, provide a really good mechanism. Another one is blended finance, and really looking at how one can optimize public sector balance sheets is very, very important. And again, I think the SANBI project gives us some scope to address that. But I think we really in South Africa haven't done our homework sufficiently in that sphere, and we need to work much harder at unlocking the finance in a sustainable manner. We know I was very pleased to see that Professor Palmer was from Rhodes University. I'm an old Rhodes student, so I've been following the crises in the municipality with much sadness over the last few years. We understand the massive crises within public sector water infrastructure management and access to resources. And to address that, it means we need partnerships, and we need partnerships with civil society and the private sector. But to have those partnerships, we need the right financing mechanisms. And I don't think we've built those appropriately within South Africa. And I don't think we, wait, I want to make
we also need to just give Alex a bit of time to speak. So yeah, if you can just close out quickly, because I need to give her
the last point is that we're not going to build those financing solutions unless we put ESG, and that's environment, social, and governance factors at the forefront of decision making. Because as long as it's profits first, we're not going to make those solutions. So that's my concluding comment.
Thank you, Libby. Alex, a minute to conclude on your side.
Swiftly then, just to address my friend Bonani's question on cost-benefit analysis, we do have a concept note around engaging in doing that for the Bergbreder and Umgeni, Bonani. And so let's chat after this, because we can see how we can learn lessons around how we go about that over the next year that could help more of our work across the country. And then on your question, Chantal, around social and public good and what it means for growth in the economy, I mean, the question that always comes up for me is really, what is the risk to not doing this? Because, I mean, for example, in Knysna, when the fire came through, that was 30 billion rand in infrastructure that it cost us. And if we had effectively cleared in that area, the situation would have been very difficult. So we need to start looking at the full scope of the implications of our actions and start to take on that risk framework, which is something that my friends at the DBSA has been really good about bringing to the fore in our work together, and also in talking about stranded assets. You know, we need to start really understanding the risks that we're exposing ourselves to by not doing the kind of work for the public good that we need to prioritize. And then the second point is that, you know, we're busy doing some biodiversity economy satellite accounts in our natural capital accounting work to start to really be able to see the contribution of biodiversity to our economy. And as we work out that piece of work, we'll start to be able to also demonstrate how our natural resource management really underpins our developmental agenda. And telling those stories, I think, are going to be very important because it's all about fostering connection and being able to dialogue better.
Thank you, Alex.
There. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. So what we need is this big number put up somewhere in terms of the risk and the cost of desilting and managing sedimentation in our country, just based on the fact that we haven't managed the system around it. So Lesego and Shafiq, that is your challenge, and to your project team as well. A big thank you to our panelists this morning, and please do keep engaging. Thank you very much for your time.